Okay, here we are. Well, welcome to the next segment of A Day of Light and Love 2024. And today is Christmas, and we're here. Dawn, you've been with me for a couple of years now, a few.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
I love that you have children, you have a partner relationship, you have children there, you have family life going on, and yet you choose to pause for an hour or so and give to humanity this way, because there's going to be someone that needs to hear what you have to say, including me, because I love to hear you share and I love your fresh perspective. You are going to talk about futuring today.
Yes.
And like I was saying before we jumped on, I feel like you're the embodiment of applied futuring. And I say that with a great amount of reverence, acknowledgement, and validation, because
Thank you.
I've watched this. And a lot of people can study things and they have the data, but the application of it, and then to become a master of manufacturing the future or manifesting the future that
Hmm.
you've designed and continue to design is really amazing. But I don't want to jump too far into your topic, because I would
Hmm.
like you to introduce yourself to the audience, whether they're watching live or they're going to watch the replay. I'd like them to know who you are if they don't already know you. So
Well, I am
love
so
to
honored to
listen.
be here, Jeannie. I love doing this and I love getting to be a part of this. I got out of my jammies and took a shower so I could be here. But I am a channel and a healer and a transformational mentor. And my specialty, as you were saying, is to really help my clients heal forward so they become their future self now. It's not living out in the future, but really embodying and applying the futuring, all the different techniques and having that be there every day. And so I find that when you use futuring as a tool for healing, it not only expedites it, but it's way more fun than focusing on the past and regurgitating it. So I've really created this new way of seeing things, which, I call the healing forward. And it's just been so fun. I love it.
That's beautiful. I um I have so many questions, but
Yeah,
I
ask
wonder,
away.
yeah, I just, the whole idea of like, instead of going back and over and over and over and over. I mean, obviously, we've studied futuring together at various intervals, and maybe define futuring, because we use that term, but perhaps you can define futuring for the audience.
Yeah, I would love to. I see it from my frame of reference is soul alignment from coming from your essences of what you want to create for your life. It's not so much egoic, it's really tapping into the dreams and desires that you want to create in your life, co-create with the divine, and really figuring out what that feels like in your body. So those are the soul essences, and then applying a vision and then taking that feeling, that vision, and creating action that is, going to help support that, and then living that on a daily basis and not just as a intellectual thought process, but making decisions from that, really coming from that place of whenever you have a choice to align with your past or your future, that you come into that present moment and go, okay, what would my future self do? What would this
Mm.
version of me that's living in more joy or more peace, what would that look like versus how I might have responded before? So I think a lot of it has to do with pausing so that we can really tune into what the now moment is asking of us. And people, I think when they think of manifesting, they think it's like this big thing that they have to, take all these crazy steps. And I actually think that manifesting happens every day in these little bite-sized moments where you're just like, okay, I'm not going to do that thing. I'm not going to respond the way I always used to do that. I'm really going to take my time and I'm going to do something a little bit differently.
No, I mean, the truth is, manifesting is happening anyway.
100%.
You're talking about intentional manifesting.
Yes.
And so those small, consistent little bites create this big, glorious, beautiful vision and future that becomes the now. You mentioned the future now. I want to talk about a couple of things. One is I heard what you said about the past, but
Hmm.
I know you enough to know that you're not talking about bypassing the past.
Not at all.
You're just talking,
No.
that's
Yeah.
not,
So yeah, with healing forward, I see it as once you decide that you want to create something in your life, because we're always creators, right? We're always stepping into that. Hopefully, it makes life a little bit more exciting when we're in that space. But whether it's health, wealth, your relationships, once you decide that you want to create that, a process begins. This whole sequence, and I call it the divine or the soul curriculum drops in from that moment. It's almost like you're putting a stake in the land and saying, okay, this is what I want. And then after that, things start to happen and there'll be obstacles and challenges. And you will face those and you're not going to resist them. You're not going to bypass them. And sometimes they will ask you to go back to the past to work on that part of yourself that's wounded or is wants to be reactive. And so it's not that you're not going back to the past, but it's very particular and it's very much specific to what you're working on because a lot of therapeutic, type of modalities, it's like you go and you sit in a room and you talk about yourself and you kind of like start regurgitating things in just the totality. And there's a time and place for that to understand ourselves. But when we get to a point where we're really working towards something that we want to create and we're refining who we are so we could be the vibrational match for it, then you start to trust that God is going to give you the exact thing that is going to that challenge or that thing that you feel like is bringing darkness into your life. I'm not talking about evil, I'm just talking about the shadow work. It's there to refine you. And oftentimes that's when people push things away because it looks like their manifestation is going in the opposite direction.
yeah.
It's like, oh no, this isn't working out. I want to make more money, but now I have no money in my bank account. And people start to go into fear, but it's the reactivity, right? Where it takes you back to your past self. So staying really present and going, oh, wait, this is part of my manifestation process. This is part of my futuring. And so then you work on it and you work on that very specific thing because when your thing comes true that you're working on, that very obstacle or challenge, you're going to have it almost on a bigger level in your manifestation. That's what I realized when I was working towards being with my fiance and moving to Idaho and all these things after living in California. The very things that I thought were the challenges and obstacles along the way last year, I had to refine myself and grow and expand so that I can handle when I'm blending families, when I'm doing all these things. So everything was preparatory. It
Wow.
wasn't it wasn't just like this kind of random thing. It was very much preparing me to hold the space, to have the resilience, to have find the joy in all the things that I was about to, do once that manifestation arrived.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. The thing that comes to mind for myself is, um, I mean, I can appreciate everything you're saying because I've been through this. You're defining it in your way, but
Hmm.
obviously it's a process. However, earlier before I knew the terms and before I had an understanding that the obstacle, like any time that anyone invites change. And so a vision for something bigger or better is a change. And
Yes.
any time that we invite change, there will be a challenge to the status quo,
100%.
right? And so I think the earlier iteration of Jeannie, it would come and I maybe know that on some intellectual level, but I wasn't necessarily emotionally ready to meet it. And that's where I have found for myself. that yeah, I've had people say to me, why do you need a coach? Why do you need a mentor? I feel like accountability for me has been probably the most, it's been as important as the information itself.
Yes, for sure. It's always so helpful. And they help you, all my mentors have always helped me see my blind spots because if you're saying it disrupts the status quo, it creates chaos. I mean, truly, when you go through massive up levels, there's a lot of chaos that precedes the actual manifestation. And it's so helpful and supportive to have somebody that's in your corner that is also holding the vision for you and that big
Yeah.
possibility, right? And they're helping you to not go into that emotional reactivity.
And the best mentors have already traveled the path.
Exactly.
So they have the fruit. They know how they grew that fruit, and they can give that zoom out like you're right on track, or they can tell if you're not right on track. And I
Hmm.
think a really good mentor will let you know that.
Yes, 100%.
And I really think that so you were talking about, manifestation, and I think a lot of times conversations around manifestation are always around what they mean is conscious manifestation.
Hmm.
Because the truth is, we're creating our reality all the time,
Yes.
right? Our words, our thoughts, our words, our habits, like
How you feel.
we're creating the outcome, right? What we choose,
Hmm.
whether it's what we choose to do or choose not to do.
Hmm.
Right? And so that accountability for me personally was a very important step to to make the discipline of conscious and intentional choices.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Hmm.
It was important for that because the default Jeannie was sloppier in her habits, in her discipline, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I say that, but I mean, it's just that that version of me wasn't going to manifest this thing over here. And there's a level, and you talked about the ego, and there's a level that at some point we have to allow certain parts of ourselves to go, to die, I hate to say die because I don't really think, I think they just have to be transformed. I'm
Yes.
not really sure
I
that
agree.
they died. I think they're always there, right?
Yeah.
And I think I
Yeah.
didn't like when I heard that part of me had to die because there were parts of me in that form that I really liked, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
I think we take it all with us,
We do.
but
I
I
agree.
do think that conscious, intentional, what I see in you is I see someone consciously intentional.
Thank you. And I do agree with what you're saying. I could also look back at versions of myself and say, oh, I was a little more sloppy. I wasn't aware of the fact that how I showed up and reacted to my reality was creating my reality. I just thought life, I was just flowing with it. And I'm glad that I had that earlier version of me. But what I didn't realize, and it all was so perfect, is when I was unintentionally creating, a lot of time it was from my wounding. So that's where I was like, wow, I really brought in the circumstances and the people that allowed me to heal that wound. And I think that's everybody's path. If they're on a journey of growing and expansion and transformation, you will attract in from your wound until you decide to come into your heart space and really to heal and see things from a different perspective. Then those messy relationships aren't attractive anymore and you draw in different type of relationships or whatever the situation is, right? So you're
Absolutely.
like,
And I'm going to say this too, because I think that there's some commonality. I've never shared this with you, but there's some commonality because um, you you have two daughters and I had two sons, so I have two sons, right? So at the ages that your children are making this transition, so I had to go through that with my own children. Mine were boys, yours are girls. And the thing about it is when you're making these choices and decisions for more than you,
Yes.
it calls for you to be more than you.
I love that.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like if you're single and you're making decisions and choices and you're going to do a turnabout, I'm not saying that it's just easy because you're single. No, I don't mean that.
No, yeah.
Because yeah, and there's healing, but when you realize that you're living or you've been living from an automatic mode that's based on your past, that you're carrying in stories. Obviously, in futuring, we learn to park the past.
Yeah.
When you when you go back and you listen to Severine's conversation
Mhm.
from earlier today, and she talked about parking the past, and
I love that.
she talked about her backpack. Like you have to like you have a lens, but you also have a backpack.
Hmm.
And she said for her, it's like she has this new image that she sees of like a parking lot, which is all the stuff that she's parked.
Oh,
And
I
she,
love that.
but she says now what I carry in my backpack are the keys to the things that I've parked. And so the backpack is lighter, so I can access them, right? I thought that was an amazing
That's a
analogy. And I'm
really,
probably like horribly
no, I think that's amazing. That's a
when you
great.
hear her say it though, it's just perfect. And
Mhm.
but back to having children, because I think there are a lot of people who like the change that you made, and I really want to talk about that for a minute. This change that you made a year ago started really before that,
Yeah.
because it started here,
Mhm.
right? Well, it
Mhm.
started here,
Yeah,
and then you
definitely.
had and you had to like the logistics and the legalities because you were living in San Diego.
Yes.
You were recently out of a relationship of long standing of your children's father, and
Mhm.
then you were entering into a relationship with someone who lived states away,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And it was just right though, and you knew it was right. You trusted it because it had all of the components that you visualized that you wanted. But the complications, it was not without obstacles.
The
It wasn't,
complications were really big.
yeah, because if it had just been you,
It had been really simple. And it was one of the biggest acts of faith that I've ever entered into. And it was almost an agreement on such a higher level with my soul and what I knew was possible for my life because it didn't make sense logically because it would have been way easier to fall in love with somebody in San Diego, but he was not in San Diego. And what I didn't realize at the time is that the next iteration of what my soul had planned for me was here in Boise. Like all the
mhm,
components of what I was stepping into, the version of who I am now couldn't exist in San Diego. So there's
right.
like such a higher unfolding to it than I understood. But to your point, when my kids were involved, I had to act from this deep place. I have a gift that, and everybody has this gift, but I have this deep, resolute knowing inside of me. And when I have that knowing, it's this unshakable force inside of me that it's like almost like God saying to me, this is part of your destiny. And so just go with that. And so when I went and met Ricky, and I felt that knowing when I was in Boise and being here, I felt that knowing when I knew I was going to have to go through all the legalities and all the, custody stuff with my former to get to here, I had a knowing. But life was not reflecting that knowing. I will be when it came to the custody part of it. It was really, I mean, I remember the first day, like the judge said to me, she's like, this is gonna be so hard for me to really figure out what to do because you guys have done such a good job co-parenting and I don't think it's a good idea that the mother just leaves and moves to Boise. I mean, it was really like I was told from the beginning of my trial, but it all worked out. And so I want our listeners to trust, their knowing because your knowing is literally this kind of timeless information from the divine that there is a path that has been set forth for you and you get to say yes to it. So many people deny that path because they're like, it feels too hard, or I don't have enough. I can't even understand how it's ever going to come together. It's not our job to ever figure out how it's going to come together.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, so trust that knowing inside of you. And then when it came to my children, I had to act on that faith and that knowing and understood that they have soul contracts, that they decided very much to be a part of this journey with me. And I had to, as a mother, really listen to my intuition in the sense that I knew who I could be if I became the person that had this manifestation in this life, that I could provide more for them than I ever could before.
Wow.
I didn't know how that was going to look, and it came true. And I'll brag for 5 seconds. My kids are both in honors now. They are doing so well. They're doing all these things because they have that support. And I think as a mother and somebody who's a futurist, like they're always part of my vision, like how I could be a better person to them to support them in their
Mm.
lives. Because futuring is not just about ourselves, right? It's about being of service to all the people that we love. And so being of service to Ricky and my kids and now Aiden, my, soon to be stepson, was very much a part of this vision that I was holding. And then when it actually comes to fruition, it's I was sitting this morning thinking like, oh my God, I wanted to always, this is so silly, Jeannie. One of my current manifestations is to learn how to cook. I never cooked in my whole life. I know it sounds like just besides like basic stuff. Being with Ricky, he's ignited this new part of me where I get to be really in my feminine because I was always like the badass, boss babe, like working my butt off, like barely like would buy stuff from the store and throw it together for my kids when I was like a single mom and all these things. And now I planned out like this whole menu for like the kids and Christmas. I made dinner, I made breakfast and all these. I never knew that side of me.
And it
So
was
that
joyful, wasn't it?
it was so joyful and it's so fun when you get to meet new parts of yourself because you said yes to yourself and you said yes to your
Oh,
knowing.
so good.
It's really fun. And I really feel like when we go through the manifestation process or futuring, however, our listeners see it, I was thinking about this before we got on the call today. And one of the things that I implemented this year, so I can slow down and pause, is I started doing Kriya Yoga every morning, which is a meditation practice. And I went back to Kundalini Yoga. And in Kundalini Yoga, they refer to God as generator, organizer, destroyer, which is such an interesting thing. But I was thinking about that in the terms of futuring. And oftentimes the destroyer part is a scary term.
Yeah.
But if I look back at this year, because you said, wow, like I futured this year, but this year I actually got to see the destroyer part. Because when you step into a new life, you destroy what was. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in the most
No.
pragmatic, like you can't be this, like you don't want to be the same person that you used to be. I didn't I shifted gears into new things because our soul is always going to expand and grow, right? So if
Mm.
you keep doing the same stuff, you're going to feel stagnated.
Yes.
So what happened this year was I got to learn how to let go of a version of myself that I was for 33 years. And that from a futuring perspective, we park the past, we park this version of ourselves. It's never gone, right? But it does metamorphosize into something else.
Yes.
And so there is a little bit of a destructive or chaotic
Yes.
quality, right? And that was a beautiful teaching for me this year of stepping into the new version of myself is to really learn to let go. And we were talking about surrendering earlier, to surrender to the process of becoming a new person
Mm.
and realizing there is a divine or like organization in it and orchestration and
Yes.
generate new life if you're willing to let go of the old.
So there's a faith component.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's a faith component because it does look like sometimes like, oh shit, everything's falling apart. Why
Yeah.
is my life like I manifested this huge thing? why is this falling apart? And what fell apart was actually my business in some ways because I
Yeah.
couldn't bring the old ways into the new.
Right.
So I tried to kind of operate from the old and it wouldn't work. And so then
Yeah.
I just completely was like, okay, God, have your way with me.
Yes.
And so I really feel that being an applied futurist is understanding it's not always just about the attainment and being like, "Ooh, look at me. I was able to create this with the divine." It's also that when God says, "Well, okay, now it's time to you stepped into the new, but you're going to still be letting go of the old. You're
Yeah.
still you have to destroy in some ways, and I'm just using that as that term.
No, it's true. And I do think that that is an impediment. Like, how many times have I thought or I said, I'm glad I didn't know, right?
I say that
Like,
all
I'm
the
glad
time.
I didn't know. I mean, I'm glad that I know now and that I'm where I am. But if I had known what I would have had to go through to claim this version of me, the destroy, like, because your ego, there's parts of you or there's parts of me I just did not want to let go of, but yet
Same,
they were required to be dissolved, transmuted. I like to see it as transmutation because,
100%.
yeah, because then I don't feel like I've lost anything.
No, we grow. It is the growth process. And I think that so many, like the manifestation people talk about on social media is so like 101 and it's
It's
very
one
much,
dimensional.
yeah, it's very one dimensional and it's very like sugary and kind of like, oh my
Yes,
God, I'm gonna
yes,
get the car
yes,
that I want. But we're talking about manifestation where your entire life evolves into your dream literally becomes your reality. That's the level of manifestation.
yes,
When you do that, when you're playing that game,
yes.
will be some transformation of who you are. You have to let your identity shift and you have to trust that everything that God, creator, is bringing into your life is because you are stepping into this next elevation that is beyond your comprehension.
Yeah,
That's it. People are trying to comprehend based on their past. They're like, oh, I
oh
don't
yeah,
understand what's happening because they're
yeah,
trying to base it on what they know. But you
right,
don't know because this is uncharted territory. God is generating a whole
right.
new reality for you.
That's right. And that's
So,
where the faith piece comes in and the
yes.
alignment that you talked about. Because if you start, I feel like when I have to push, when I feel that, like there will be a resistance that might show itself as an obstacle.
Yeah,
But if that resistance persists, then I have to say, wait a second, did I just take this back? Is this not God? Because what I learn is the overcoming then becomes empowering. But if
yeah,
I'm stuck in this rut, like a car stuck in a snowbank, right?
yeah.
Rocking the car. If I recognize that, I go, oh God, when did I get in God's chair? When did I push him out? Because that urge for that ego to take over is really, and to understand. We will not understand, nor do I, I'm glad that I don't understand. That's the adventure of it, though. Don't you think that?
That is the best way to say it. It is quite the adventure. Life becomes much more not as predictable, but isn't that the best thing ever? Because when things are predictable and you can see, oh, if I'm doing this now, 25 years, I'm gonna be doing the same thing. Oh no, like who wants that? Like you want, you want to
Yeah.
explore new vistas
Well,
and new careers.
maybe some people do, but I don't
Maybe they
think
do.
that if you're, I don't know, when you're called for something more, there's a saying, you can't take the same old you into a bright new future. I would say you can't take the same old you into the brilliant future that your
Yeah.
soul is calling you to. Like you just
Yeah.
can't. You
No.
by definition, it negates anything else than what is. So there has to be an advancement within you and a willingness to shed and transform
Our
yourself.
purpose. I think it's like that's when we're really living in our purpose because we're willing to say yes to the desires of our heart and see them as the seeds for growth, right? If you have this desire plant in your heart, I want this really healthy relationship, or I want my body to feel more vibrant. That's been planted in your heart for a reason because it exists in a future timeline. And then
Yes.
it's the whole game, right, is learning how to be it now and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I think it's there because we want to grow. And there are people maybe that don't, and they probably think I'm crazy, but
It's
which
okay.
is
They can. I'm good with that.
yeah, I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's really saying yes to life and living this really, it's almost like life becomes very seductive because it's always asking you to kind of look at things and be part of the mystery and be in the adventure and have more passion because you're finding new creative ways to discover who you are. Like I did not realize that at this age that I was going to learn how to cook. I think it's hilarious, but it's such a creative act for me that I
Or
pushed.
that you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like life has all these things in store for us when we say yes.
And don't you feel like that it's like the future or the future you or the vision of you or the next version or the multiple versions ahead, there's this magnetizing. Like from where you're standing, none of it makes any sense.
No,
I remember being in California, being a single mom, having moved my boys to California, and a year almost to the day later, I moved back, married to Denny. Oh yeah. And from the outside, I know that anyone who looked at me, they just thought, this girl is unhinged, right? Because but was the craziest part of it was I never intended to come back to the Chicago area. I intended to be. I mean, but God was leading. I had to do that to come back as a more advanced version of me to be able to meet that family that you're talking about creating. It's very similar to your path
mm,
there. And I needed what I learned there in that 9 month or 10 month window. I needed that, but I was pulled. I was magnetized. It made no sense. I don't even know how I got back here and drove. I'm serious. Like,
like miracles. Yeah.
yeah, it was like a quantum leap occurred. And and then going forward, were there challenges? Yes.
Of
But
course.
never at any point whatsoever did I stop feeling magnetized
Mm,
in
I love
that
that.
creation of that family and that relationship. And even to this day, yet last night I hosted Christmas Eve.
Oh,
And Denny's and my family blended because his children were adults by the time we married, and he helped me raise my boys that were much younger. His grandchildren, which are my grandchildren,
oh, I love
they
that. So
blended our family. And so everybody was here last night. And the beauty, just, it's a beautiful
beautiful.
dynamic.
Your
It just,
soul knew that was part of your life, part of your blueprint, right? It's like God
that's
was
what I
like,
was magnetized
yeah,
to, but I couldn't define all that. I
no.
just felt that I had to.
Oh, I love that so much.
And I know you felt that. I know you did.
Oh, I mean, well, rewind back to 4 years ago when you were my relationship coach. Do you remember? And you were helping me clear and let go of my former relationship, not because I was stuck on it, but because I really wanted to clear energetically who I was to be the vibrational match for Ricky. And I don't know why.
Not even knowing that his name was Ricky.
No, yeah, not knowing his name was Ricky. Exactly. And the thing that, I know people want to manifest like houses or cars. For me, it's always been family because I know my growth as a individual is so much through the reflections of my family. And I don't know why it's just always something I've always held so near and dear. And I thought, well, God, I failed at it before, because I couldn't make it work with my former. I tried everything, but we just weren't even then, when I was leaving, I didn't know. I was like, oh, this just wasn't going to work. And I surrendered. I was like, okay, God, if this is my destiny to be a family, then you're just going to have to show me what's going to happen because I tried it and it didn't work that way. And so even just this holiday, sitting and looking at the family that we've created, that feels so much more it was the dream that I always had, but I didn't know it was going to take that form, right? Because I think sometimes we're trying to control with our mind and go, oh, it's going to take this.
Yes.
That wasn't the way it was ever meant to be. And
Yeah.
so now I can sit and go, oh my gosh, this
And
is
that's the surrender piece because you couldn't get there. You can't, I
totally.
couldn't get there without surrendering, even when it made no sense to the outside world and the critics and the unsolicited commentary and
I
right.
had I had a lot of,
And they felt those people that were offering that they weren't ill intentioned. They were good
no,
intentioned,
100%.
but uh, part of futuring, part of being an applied futurist, like you have mastery in, I can assure you, is to not engage in the outside commentary perspective because that perspective is of the status quo of really the past because as soon as you convert it in your head, even though it hasn't shown up in the present, it's already in the present
Yeah.
because it's actualized in you.
Yeah. And I had a lot of people who probably would have thought or said to me, they didn't come out and say that I was delusional, but they would say, oh, are you sure you want to spend all this money in the court systems? Are you sure that you want to move to Idaho? You live in San Diego. It's the best place in the world. And yes, 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 to all of what everybody thought. And sometimes your knowing and your truth is not, like you said, it's not aligned with the status quo. And it probably never should be, like somebody's soul's truth should be your own and it's your
Yeah.
own path. And I did have a lot of people that I had to really be so mindful of when I felt open to critics or when I felt like I didn't have it in me to listen. Because there was times where I was even going into my own self-doubt where I was like, oh my God, am I crazy for all these things that I want? And am I allowed to like want this much in my life? And I would start to kind of say, well, I better not be around my critics right now. Because I knew I had a few critics. And I also started to see it as when people would come to me and say, tell me all the horror stories of court, because I got that all the time. People are like, you're crazy, like, courts favor men, blah, blah, all these things. And I would I would see it as this person is a messenger and they're trying to prepare me. And it's not that what they're saying is going to be my scenario. It's just that they're trying to get me to shift my energy and come back to my own truth. And I kept seeing it that way because this is a whole nother spiritual talk, but like there were times when in my life, if somebody was saying something that I didn't agree with because I was futuring, I would want to push them away. But I actually learned that they're messengers helping us deal with our resistance internally.
That's good,
And so
Dawn.
it helped me to start to reframe those conversations because
Yeah.
I realized a lot of people think part of futuring is holding a vision that most people will not be able to see, and that's okay because that's why it's called visionary, right? Like visionaries have the vision that is
And it's
innovative.
because it's yours.
It's yours. Exactly. It's not for anybody else, right? And so I think part of why I can apply futuring so well is because I've divorced myself from the commentary and needing to fit into the status quo. I've never really fit in. And so it was easier for me. I'm not in any like trying to keep up with the Joneses or do any of those kind of things. I have always just kind of followed my own path, but it inspires people, and that's why I'm able to teach futuring because people are like, oh my gosh,
Absolutely.
you did it, and not everybody will want to go to the certain levels with it. They just want to manifest, maybe
And
next.
that's okay. And it's not
Yeah.
that you did it, it's that you are a conscious, dynamic, applied futurist. You are. I mean, there's the next iteration and the next, and you're anticipatory because what I get from you is you're consciously intentional.
Yes. And that is one thing I would love to tell listeners is that when you start to really do this type of work for yourself, will realize that you can do more from stillness and mindfulness than you
Mm.
ever could being super busy and super trying to control and force your will. When you actually just get in that stillness and start to trust the divine is really moving through your life, it gets easier. It doesn't mean the obstacles don't come or the challenges don't happen. It's just that you see them as just part of it. And you're not as resisting. You're
They're
accepting.
part of the recipe for
It's part
whatever.
of life, right, Jenny? It's like
Yeah.
it's part of life.
Yeah. And
And
again, like you said earlier, you begin to realize once you're through it a few times and you go, oh, it's the next refinement. Oh, it becomes an opportunity, less of a less of a challenge or an obstacle.
And you're refining your ability to hold more light
Yes.
when you don't react to the negativity and the difficulties the same way. And you really pause and just say, okay, God, I trust you. I trust that you want me to see this from a new perspective. You literally are able to bring more light in because God can only pour so much into you. If you're already full of trauma still and all these different beliefs and you keep wanting to go back to the past, you don't have much capacity to hold more light. And light is blessings. Light is the abundance everybody is speaking of, thinking, I should say. So when I say light, that's what I'm referring to is your ability to see your life transform in front of your eyes, right? And that's because you are walking through life in a way that you are very intentional and you see everything as part of it. So
Yes.
right? So it's like then you have more ability to hold the abundance.
So good. We could just keep talking,
I
but
know, I love
we
talking.
can't because we're like
We
at
have other
45.
people.
We have one more Linda Heller's coming on in like 3 minutes. So
It's
no,
amazing.
Dawn, I love you. I'm
I love you too.
incredibly I'm proud of you. I'm awe of you. I'm learning from you. I'm happy for you. I think that um you have some gifts that are absolutely tremendous, and I look forward to seeing what you're going to do with them.
Thank you. Likewise, my beautiful friend. Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. And for our audience, we're going to say goodbye.